One. Hi guys, welcome to the Guitar Show. This is Goose here, and we're here with the amazing Dan Coggins, who's actually a personal hero of mine. It's with the utmost pleasure that I can invite him on the show. How are you doing, Dan?
Hi Raymond, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to introduce me thus. I'm all right, thank you. And you?
Fantastic. And Dan is a hero and a legend of mine. Many years ago, when I don't want to name drop, but I was working with Jim Palmer, as a good friend of mine. Jim Palmer is the son of Robert Palmer, and we were making an album. And my friend Jim had lots of these incredible looking pedals from a company called Lovetone, and that's where I first became aware of your legend. You know. So should we take it?
Thank you. It's really cool to know that Jim, son of Robert, was into Lovetone pedals and I guess still is, hopefully. But yeah, well, I'm a fan of his dad's work, and tell me a bit more about Jim sometime, because that'd be cool.
Yeah. So if we take it right back to the beginning, can you just tell us, at your own pace, just take us through it, how you ended up becoming, my favorite pedal maker?
Oh, thanks. Well, it's a long, convoluted journey, but the interesting thing, I suppose, is it follows a very definite path. Looking back at it, and all the bits join up in a way that make it seem like it was meant to be. And it's probably just because I haven't got a very wide repertoire of things to be interested in. It could be a single-mindedness that just comes from that, really. But anyway, I was born fifth born, youngest born of a family of 5 children to sort of wartime era parents. So all my brothers and sisters are baby boomers. I was born in the late 60s, so I'm actually a Gen Xer. My next oldest brother, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, Jim, he was about 14, 15 when I was born. So he had a lot of records that he borrowed off his mates, things like the Beatles' White Album, and he used to sing me Rocky Raccoon as a lullaby when I was a baby, and I can actually remember that. It's one of my earliest memories, and it's a really nice one to have. So whenever I hear that song, it's kind of nice. But I don't remember Revolution #9 from that period, but I worked out that I was born the day they were mixing that, so that kind of tells you something. But yeah, so listening to things like that, Hey Jude, Get Back, so that's the Beatles thing covered. My generation, my older brother George had the single of that. They had Hendrix, The Who, King Crimson's first album. So I was brought up on all this stuff, and one of the first guitar sound records I heard that really excited me was In My Chair by Status Quo. I was about 2 at that point. Paranoid, Black Sabbath, what was the other? Black Knight, Deep Purple, Strange Kind of Woman. So all these early rock records, early metal records, I guess, in some respects, were being played on the family Marconi radiogram with its UL84 output valve, as I found out later on. Now, that radiogram later on, I actually made into a fuzz box by connecting a pair of BY127 silicon diodes back to back across the loudspeaker. I don't know how I got that idea. I think I saw it in some electronics magazines that this was one way of doing it, and I tried it, and it actually sounded pretty good. But of course, I couldn't play records on it, so I had to take them off because it sounded crap, because it's so distorted, But anyway, backtracking a bit. So I'm a toddler listening to records. My dad uses that as a baby alarm because everyone else was out of the house. He was busy. I was upstairs playing records on the auto changer, and when they stopped playing, he thought it might be a good idea to check on me. The fact that they could have been playing themselves for 20 minutes, regardless, is besides the point. But my brothers would go to work and say, Dan, you can play our records, but you must keep them clean. Well, I took this a bit too literally and ran the bath and got some Ajax out and some Brillo pads and ruined lots of records. And I spoke to my eldest brother, George, not so long ago, a couple of years ago, and he said, do you know that one of the records that you destroyed was a white label of Revolver?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
How much would that be worth now? How much?
I don't even want to know how much that would be worth now, but it happens to be one of my all-time favourite albums. And I'd worked this out 40 years ago when I first heard it, that it was the best Beatles album for me. And now, of course, it's regarded as the best Beatles and best anybody's album. But I'm not saying that I know much about these things, but it struck me as their coolest album, you know. But I love all their stuff, everything really, from start to finish. So okay, I'm listening to these records, and I'm curious about what goes on because I can see peering in the back of the radiogram these little orange things lighting up, the valves, heaters, and the television repairman used to come around because, like a lot of people in those days, well, a lot of working class people, I guess, in those days, we rented our television.
Mhm.
And of course, they were always going wrong at that time. And the man comes out, takes the back off, changes some valves. You see all these lovely bright coloured components inside them because it's one of the ones where they used to pull out the insides of the telly so it was like 3 feet wide.
Wow.
This
But,
like a telephone exchange. You know, this is in the comfort of your own home. I mean, my heroes were the dustman, the chimney sweep, and the TV repairman. And
incredible.
my dad used to get me to wave at the dustman, you know, so I didn't grow up being stuck up. But unfortunately, if I see a dust cart now, I have to sort of do that because they might think I'm a bit dodgy or something.
I think it's good. It's
Anyway,
a noble job, isn't it? And they don't get the recognition.
well, that was his thinking, you know, and he was right. You know, I think
Dan, you know, like in those,
Mhm.
because when I was brought up in Argentina, Buenos Aires, and my grandmother had
Right.
like a record player from the 60s, because I was born in England but sent over there because my dad was from Argentina.
Right.
And I remember the
Okay.
record player we had, it kind of it stopped working, and all we had to do was replace the valves, and it had a beautiful sound, and it was EL84s. They seem to be
Oh, yes.
the valve choice of a lot of things, didn't they? The EL84.
Oh, EL84 was the go-to valve for anything kind of low-powered. I mean, most, you know, the Danset major record player had an EL84. This radiogram had a UL84. Well, that's exactly the same valve, except the heater voltage is different. An EL84, because it's got an E, means it's 6.3 volt AC heater, and a UL84, well, the U was a series heater, and in that case, it's 45 volts. But the U could mean any volt. It means it had a certain amount of milliamps current. They were connected like Christmas tree lights. So overall, they would equal 240 volts. You stick them across the mains and they all light up. And you put a little lamp at the end when that's your panel lamp on the piece of equipment. That's for stuff that was meant to work on a DC or AC mains, which is why it's amazing I'm still here having connected my guitar to the chassis. Which reminds me, my brother came home with a bass guitar and a little homemade sort of like 10-inch speaker and a cube, and he had these felt plectrums and things. He didn't play it for very long. I don't think he really took to it. But that and the curly guitar lead and everything, the radiogram, the records, that all made me think, I want to know how these sounds are made, you know? And there's something a bit naughty about the back of a television set with this sort of cardboard cover where you could see through the holes, but you weren't allowed to go inside and find out. And it said on the back, no use of serviceable parts, do not open, risk of electric shock. So, I mean, you know, I was pretty well behaved as a kid and obedient, but there was something kind of thrilling about that as a possibility. And indeed, I was attempting to fix televisions by the age of 10. And so I was a complete geek. I didn't have an action man or play football or any of these normal things. I was doing that and reading everyday electronics and stuff. I gave all that up all the way through my teens and early 20s because I was more interested in beer and girls, like most normal guys, you know. But well, I don't know if you can say that these days, but I've just said it now. So there you go. Well, that was my take on in the 80s, all right. And so the other thing was, my dad bought me an electronics kit in Christmas '76, so I'd have been just over 8 years old at that point. And it was a thing called a Philips X40. In fact, just downstairs, I've got one.
Oh wow!
I bought one on eBay. I gave away the first one, but
I remember
sorry, I've got
those.
to
I
turn the
remember
sound back
those.
on here.
I do remember
Turn
those
that
because
sound off.
you could get like a chemistry kit, and apparently they even sold like nuclear radioactive stuff and that. They had to ban it in America in the 60s.
I wouldn't be surprised. I can remember you could get copper sulfate in them, which is poisonous.
Yeah.
And you could make this wonderful blue, you know, look like a slush puppy drink or something like that, you know, the blueberry one. Yeah, I always wanted a chemistry set and one of those post office do it yourself at home things, you know, but you can't have everything. I had to bug my dad to get me that electronic kit because what it was, there was an advert in Look and Learn magazine which he was buying me, and I wasn't especially interested in Look and Learn because that meant finding out about stuff I wasn't particularly interested in. But on the back cover they had this thing called a Radionic X40 electronic kit, which had 40 projects in it. It was made by Philips, and now we know about Marshall and Hiwatt amps with their mustard coloured Mullard capacitors in them. Well, this thing had 3 or 4 of those in it.
Oh wow!
And since I've actually done some designs just for a bit of fun with my friend Rod Breaks, he writes for Guitarist magazine. We did a series of experiments of making overdrives and fuzzes and octave doublers with my old electronic kit, and they all sounded pretty good, you know. But
wow. So
anyway, so you could build your own radio and stuff like that.
And so, how did that sort of transpire into you building your first pedal?
Well, I didn't build my first pedal for some time, but because I was reading these everyday electronics and practical electronics, practical wireless, occasionally friends' dads would give me Wireless World, which was like the expensive one. It looked like Country Life, you know. It was all printed on what's the name of that? You know, the China clay color covers and all that. And they had some really cool circuits in those. I looked them all up in the British Library and Imperial College later on, just to see how things were done later, before pre-internet kind of time, or before any of that was on the internet anyway, sort of late 90s. Yeah, well, I was looking at projects in these magazines, and they'd all kinds of stuff, you know, Crystal Set, Tumble Dryer Alarm, you know, some really corny stuff. Doorbell that sounds like a canary.
And through this, did you learn, like, you know, the you know, like all the technical terms and the law and the equations, whatever?
I did. I learned loads about it, and I also learned my rather stiff engineering writing style from it, which probably really annoys people to this day. You know, but I can't help it. That's how I learned to write about this stuff. I did actually write some magazine articles in the early 90s that probably sold about 10 copies.
Amazing.
In reality, but I did do about 3 or 4, maybe 5 guitar pedal projects then, just before Lovetone. But there were projects like fuzz boxes, tremolo units, treble boosters, that sort of thing, phasers. I don't think they got any wilder than that. But yeah, I found out how to do that kind of stuff from seeing the magazine projects. And I think it wasn't until I was about 14 I bought a book written by someone called AJ Flynn, and it was electronic projects for.
It wasn't the Craig Hartley there for a minute.
J.R. Hartley fly fishing. Yeah, I got that one and tried to make a fuzz box out of it, and phoned people up saying that. Yeah, I think I have actually done that in the past. Phoned someone up and said, "Have you got fly fishing by J.R. Hartley?"
I don't think our American viewers won't know what we're.
No, sorry. It's to do with an old. Was that the Yellow Pages advert?
Yeah, it was a Yellow Pages advert.
Yeah, a phone directory advert back in England years ago. Sorry, folks, we're going off on one.
So my fault.
Anyway, that's okay. But anyway, this book that I bought, the AJ Flynn book, it had about 20 projects in, and it had a fuzz box in it, and I built that. Didn't like the sound of that much. I made a tremolo unit from it, and I liked that. And my friend Dale Davis, who was 2 years older than me from our school, he heard this and he said, "Oh, that's really good." And he went on to play for Amy Winehouse later on.
Wow.
And I was at school with his younger brother, Wendon, and they were both in Freak Power as well back in the 90s.
Great band, loved them.
Yeah. So, but Dale was on bass and Wendon was on percussion. You know.
Because they had a great
congas and stuff. Yeah. Anyway, and also their dad's Orange amp, and I heard that and tried a P bass through it and thought, "Oh, this is great." And I've always wanted to play bass since then, but I've always stuck to 6 strings and just got into bass now, all these years later. Anyway, I did actually make a fuzz box out of everyday electronics, and that was when I was in my first band at school. I used that, and it's pretty hideous sounding. I think I put a tone control on it. It didn't have a tone control. So it basically went from sounding like to and that was about it, really.
Fantastic.
So I did that, and then I ended up doing a milk round, and I bought Boss pedals. I had a C2 chorus, a BF2 flanger, I got into U2 and so I had to have a delay. So I bought an Ibanez AD9, which I still got,
Wow.
super metal, because I thought that they sounded nicer than the Boss ones at the time. And this was like 1984, like 15, 16.
Was that the 10 series or the 9 series?
The 9 series, yeah.
9
I really like the 9 series Ibanez
Yeah.
pedals. They sound
Yeah.
lovely. And I've got one of those bi-mode choruses. Do you know that one?
Yes, I think, yeah. I mean, because like now the rage is for the 10 series, because like Mr. Mayer, not John Mayer, John Mayer,
Oh,
has,
okay. John Mayer, not Roger Mayer.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
I-
yeah.
I-
And Roger Mayer wouldn't
I
be
don't
celebrating the Ibanez 10 series, I guess. But yeah, yeah. The 10 series to my ear just sounds like the 9 series repackaged in a slightly crappier package to me. But yeah, and I've never heard much difference personally between TS9s and TS10s. Oh, sorry, folks. Sorry.
I think it's
You
like,
can argue all you like about it. I don't care. They do what they do. They make a mid-range fuzz sound and not fuzz overdrive sound, and I thought they were pretty good. And I used one for years. And I used to use later on used a rat pedal and or a fuzz face
Mhm.
first off, and then would go into the TS9, sorry, TS10. I had a TS10, and that's what led me to think of the idea of putting the two Lovetone big cheese and brown sauces in one enclosure later. Same kind of principle, fuzz into overdrive. But that's going forward a little bit. So where are we now?
your
80s.
80s, and you've discovered lots of things,
Proper
but you
pedals, yeah.
too, you too.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not, you know what? I'm not allowed to do any innuendos. I've been banned from innuendos on this channel. I did it in the last Bob
Ooh,
and
Mick.
Rock show, so I'm not going to do any innuendos ever again.
Well, you can't do anything anymore now, can you? I suppose we should make the most of this while we can, that we can actually have the freedom to talk about guitar pedals, because that's probably going to be banned soon as well.
But
I had a Crybaby wah as well. Not a Crybaby, a Colour Sound wah. That was my first ever pedal. My dad bought me that when I was 11. I didn't even have a guitar or amp or a lead to use it with. It was almost like, study this because one day you might make pedals.
Wow, amazing. So,
well, yeah.
So you've got you've basically got some Ibanez, you've got some Boss, and
Yeah.
what gave you the kind of, how did you take it from kind of the, it's an interest, a hobby? How did you take it to the next step where it's become where you're earning money from it?
Well, no, not at that point. No, no, I was still doing odd jobs and blowing my money on beer, cigarettes, records, and guitars. Really, that was pretty much it. But then again, it's good to know what you like, isn't it? And at that age, I was playing in 2 college bands. I don't think we were particularly great, but it was good fun, and I'm glad I did it. And it certainly gave me an impetus or an incentive, sorry, to find out how these damn things worked and how you use them on a stage, and I think I had a Vox Escort 50 transistor amp, which looked like a little AC30 that my dad got me on HP. That dates me a bit, doesn't it? And that was when I was about 15. What else? I was always playing tellies or Strats at that time, or trying to play them, I should say. Yeah, and those pedals, I made a pedal board of a couple of no, aluminium. I wasn't about to cut it otherwise. A couple of rectangular aluminium plates, and I bolted the pedals into them, connected the positive feeds through the back, and then daisy chained them so the earth was through the pedals. That was out of laziness rather than trying to do it properly, and it also conveniently avoided earth loops, so that was good.
You built the first switching system.
Well, not really. No, I think Pete Cornish was doing that for the Bay City Rollers in 1974, 75, actually. If you
right, yeah.
Find out. Yeah, well, Pete Cornish features later on.
Okay.
Remind me about that. But anyway, yeah, that was my pedal board. 2 of each of those Ibanez and Boss pedals with my Colour Sound in the middle for symmetry. And I turned it into a volume pedal so I could swell into the echo to take the attack off. I built a noise gate into it and a power supply into it, and it was about this, like the Fisherman. It was about this big by this big. It was not particularly small, but it was obviously smaller than most people's pedal boards nowadays. Yeah, and I used to lugged that around, and I got a JC120 Roland for a while, which I eventually sold and bought an AC30 with, and that was one of the smarter moves in my lifetime.
But
Nothing wrong with the JC120.
Yeah, is that the jazz chorus amp?
Yeah, the Jazz Chorus. That was a great amp. I loved it because I was a big fan of the Cult, so I wanted the Billy Duffy sound.
Yeah.
At that point, and,
No,
and it certainly gets you some way to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in like in some places where only the Roland amp actually could cut through and was loud enough. You know.
Mm. I think they're really great amps, actually, and I'm not saying that going from that to an AC30 is anyway demeaning to the Roland. It was great for what it was, but when I got the AC30, something resonated with me at that point, and this was like early 1991, so I'm in my early 20s by this time, and that was one of the big turning points for me, getting that Vox amp, which I paid £350 for, having almost bought one for £80 a month or two earlier. So that's the kind of money they were going for then. They were just starting to get.
Yeah.
This is a 64, this one as well, Blues speakers. So they're getting more expensive at this point because of REM and U2 and people finally starting to twig that to get those great guitar sounds. And those bands do have great guitar sounds, always did. Mm-hmm. The AC30 is a big component in that. The detail, the immediacy, the projection, the harmonics, it just works, doesn't it? I don't know what you think of AC30s, but
I love them.
I consider them to be one of the best. Oh, well, yeah, exactly. And that's how Brian May got into them, isn't it?
And the Beatles.
Yeah, and everyone else, really. And then later on, I got to meet Dick Denny, which was fantastic. But again, that's much later.
Yeah.
So where are we now? Early 90s. Yeah, I got into the whole, I wouldn't say grunge because I was never particularly into grunge, but I was into alternative rock.
I started playing guitar I started playing guitar in 91, 92, but that was an incredible time for music because you had all the old.
It was, yeah, sure.
Because you still had like all the old, all the old boys like Dire Straits, Eric Clapton, Phil Collins. You still had all them like releasing really massive albums, but then you had all this new sort of indie, like the Lars, the Stone Roses coming up, Suede, and all these bands,
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it was a really great time. And I went to the 91 and the 93 Reading festivals. I was lucky enough to see Nirvana in 1991, the first year they played at Reading.
Wow. Incredible.
And that was, I've already said this in another interview, but it was, it was one of those rare occasions where you see this new band and you're ready to hate them, and within the first song you just think they're great, and every single song they do afterwards just puts a smile on your face, and you think, oh, I'm so bloody glad I'm here today. And it was one of them, and I don't think any band I ever saw was better than that in that respect.
Yeah,
seen a lot of great gigs, and I could have seen a lot more thinking about it, but that year I was out and about quite a bit, and that was 91 was a really great year at Reading. I think it's now regarded as a bit of a milestone in the so-called grunge thing, but I think it's really about alternative rock really coming of age and getting through to the masses, because you'd had bands like Sonic Youth and well, obviously Nirvana, Dinosaur Jr. were there that year, brilliant. I mean, look it up on the internet. There was just so many great bands on in 91.
Jesus,
I think they. Yeah. I didn't ever see them. I wish I had, because I really like them. I did.
Yeah.
I did have. Well, I'm not going to talk about that. But I do. Let's just say I met a girl once who knew them.
Right. Okay.
And leave it at that.
Okay.
Leave it at that. Yeah. East Kilbride. She was from, and they're from. So that do your homework, folks, and work out who that was. But anyway, yeah. That 91, 92, 93, saw Radiohead at the After Dark in Reading in early 93 when Creep was in the charts, so that was cool.
And that's kind of poignant, isn't it? Because Radiohead feature in your story, don't they?
Well, yeah, I did fix some gear for them through their guy Plank, Pete Clements, in 2005, and I did bump into Ed O'Brien at the Roundhouse when Johnny Marr was playing. He just walked past me, and I stopped him and said hello. Well, basically, I ascertained that those pedals did find their way onto those records. And I mean, I know they bought a set at the time. And what I often say to people is I wasn't listening to much contemporary music at this point. And it's true, I wasn't. I'd gone completely back because Vlad and I had a thing that, you know, music died in 1973, and we were kind of taking that a bit too literally, really. The invention of the Dolby system destroyed music, and once it went to 24 tracks, man, that was it. It was all over by then. But I don't believe that now, and that's a really, well, I don't subscribe to that thinking now. I'm hearing stuff all the time that I like from, and actually some recent stuff as well. So
Yeah, when you want to say like modern music is rubbish, and you know, like because when I say modern music, when I say rock and roll died in the mainstream. But of course, there's lots of stuff on the fringe, like there always is.
Yeah, and what's annoying is we're not getting to hear much of it really through the common channels. And I'm sure, you know, if I was in my 20s again, I'd probably have a bit more get up and go to find out about it. But I'm kind of happy with where I am at the moment. I've got more than enough. I mean, I've got 100 LPs just here, and this is in my bedroom.
Wow.
Where I have my office. That's why I've got the bed behind me. I'm not, you know, not trying to hint at anything or anything. But and then downstairs I've got lots more, and this is my mono setup, and downstairs I've got a stereo setup which I'm about to turn into a surround sound Hafler system, you know, so I can listen to Quadrophenia as God intended, you know.
Absolutely. And Pink Floyd? Pink Floyd, did they do it?
I love Pink Floyd. They're one of my favourite bands, and I know a lot of people now think it's all about Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, and The Wall, and those three albums are, I think, really fantastic albums, and it's quite right that people should check them out and listen to them. But I would urge people to also listen to Animals, Meddle, Piper at the Gates of Dawn with Syd Barrett, who I love Syd Barrett, and Obscured by Clouds is worth a listen to as well. That one gets under the radar too easily.
Yeah.
Did I mention Meddle with Echoes and One of These Days on? Because I used to go to sleep every night with the I taped the vinyl onto my cassette player, and I used to go to bed in the dark listening to Echoes every night for probably a couple of years.
On a Walkman, on a cassette Walkman.
No, I had a Marantz sort of ghetto blaster thing.
Right.
I'd had one since I was about 12, and I just used to listen to that.
Wow.
So I was constantly listening to stuff all the time, and I mean, I play guitar up after a fashion up to a point, and have done since I was 10 years old. But I should be a damn sight better than I am by now. But what I will say in my defence is that I'm a listener, and I'm a fan of music and all kinds of music as well. I like some jazz, and I like. I mean, all the rock stuff over the years in all its forms. I like prog rock, and I also like, you know, the early heavy stuff, your Sabbaths and whatnot, and some classical. But there's loads of other, you know, a bit of reggae. You know, I could, you know, I don't know what all these subgenres are now, and I can't be asked with it all really, because I find it too, you know, genres get on my nerves anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
John Peel said, there's.
You know, I mean, when people say to me, "Oh, have you heard this new band and that?" or this, you know, I always say, you know, that there's new music coming from, you know, the Arabic world. There's new music coming from Africa. There's new, you know, but we only hear new music coming from America or in England. And you know, I want to hear new music coming from, you know, from Africa. You know, that's me personally.
Of course, yeah.
Because I think there's something happening there in the Sahara Desert, which is more modern and more inventive than we're hearing from America in their £1 million studios.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's some really great stuff being done that I've probably not heard, you know, or I certainly haven't. I've got Ali Farka Touré, a few albums,
yes.
and a Staff Bender Bilili album that was recorded on a Mac in the middle of nowhere with some generator, apparently. Quite impressive. Was somewhere like that.
So if we get back, if we digress back to, so you're soaking up the sounds. It's early 90s. And you know, you're soaking up the sounds. You're playing in your band. So you're kind of getting to know how a pedal sits within the soundscape, which is, you know, obviously, you know, if you're making pedals or designing pedals, that's what you kind of got to keep that in mind, is how they're going to work in a band, not just on their own. You know, they can sound pretty on their own, but in a band context, you know, is that something you kind of thought about? You know?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, two bands that spring to mind that really taught me a lot about pedals were the Police and Rush. They were two of my favourite bands in the 80s. and I spent a lot of time working out Andy Summers and Alex Lifeson's guitar parts. Now, Alex Lifeson, I could more or less keep up with some of the Andy Summers stuff, but Alex Lifeson, the solos, I could not emulate. But yeah, but the whole thing about sorry, folks, Hoffner very thin here, 1965. But the thing about the major chord, but with the strings ringing out there. That put some chorus and delay and whatnot on that, and it gets really quite interesting. And in the context of a three-piece band, well, they're just great bands. I like. They're not everyone's cup of tea.
It just makes the guitar wider, and because when you're playing in a three-piece band, it's really hard. It's really, you feel like you've got to fill the space. You feel like it's empty, but the effects do give, because it's more textural. Then it's more like a texture, and it's more like a keyboard almost. So. Or an orchestra.
Yes, that's right. Well, you get like a modern example like Muse. I mean, they obviously take that three-piece thing and really work it well, don't they?
Yeah.
With the sounds. But yes, I mean, in fact, my first real proper gig, again, I've talked about this before in an interview, so I won't go on about it, but it was Rush in 1983 at Wembley Arena on the Signals tour, and I was watching from the side of the balcony down onto the stage, and I could see Alex Lifeson actuating his pedals and the sounds changing. So that, and in the program that I bought afterwards, was the only money I had on me probably, he listed all of his pedals on there, and I was reading about them and getting curious about them from that point onwards, really. So I suppose from about the time I was 14, I started to really care about how they were getting these sounds and learning how it was done. Reading Guitarist magazine came out about that time, I think 84, wasn't it, when it came out? And that was excellent. Some really good articles and interviews.
Because I used to remember the Guitarist magazine back then, Dan. It used to have, the guy from the Hamsters. He used to write a column in there, didn't he?
Oh, Snail's Pace Slim, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
Andy, real name. I'm sure it was him, and Phil Hillborn, people.
Andy Ingram,
Jeff White, guys like that. Yes,
Neville Martin.
Yeah, and they had what's the guy did? They did a series called From Rock to Jazz in it. I'm trying to remember who wrote that, but that was talking about modes and altered scales and.
Sean Baxter.
It might have been Sean Baxter. Yeah. That name rings a bell.
Yeah.
But there were some really great theory articles in there as well, and Guitar Player was a great magazine if you could get it or afford it in England.
Yeah, that was good on that.
I'm just so I was always skint when I was that age. Some things never change actually, but I was do I buy that or do I go to the pub? It was it's important decisions like that.
So yeah, take it.
Yeah. No, so at that point, sorry, carry on.
No. The viewers in this channel they hate me anyway for interrupting. So I just want to say,
no, you're not interrupting. I think it's folks, it's this terrible problem with digital electronics is called lag. If only it was all analog. It'd be horrible if it was analog as well. So it's a mixture of two, really, isn't it? Well, at that point, I suppose early 90s. Really, yeah, I'm sort of zigzagging in time because I'm trying to join all the bits up. Sort of, I'm winging it. We're winging it, really, aren't we?
Yeah, I've been winging it. Still winging it.
But I think it's the best way. That's the best way to do things, and long may winging be a thing. In the 90s, I suppose the next turning point is, I was in a couple of other bands and experimenting with pedals and borrowing pedals and borrowing Electro-Harmonix pedals, because the whole thing with the grunge thing, if you like, was the big muff. There was a band called Mudhoney that had there was a T-shirt that had the Electro-Harmonix big muff on the front. It was called Super Fuzz Big Muff, the album, which I still haven't heard, believe it or not. How can I say I was into that era of music and I still don't know that album? But it's just one of those ones I haven't listened to yet, and I'm going to now. I'm going to make a point of it. I'm going to write it down.
I remember them. Were they a Seattle band?
I think they might have been.
Yeah.
Again, I'm still not sure. I mean, my favourite bands of that era were Sonic Youth, Pixies, Dinosaur Jr.
Pixies, I love Pixies.
And Nirvana, and that was it. I didn't get into Faith No More or those other, all great bands. I think I saw was Chris Cornell's band Soundgarden. I saw them at Reading.
Alice in Chains.
They did a version of the Soundgarden did Pearl
Pearl
Jam.
Jam.
You Sheep Go Heavy by the Beatles at Reading Festival, and that was fantastic.
Yeah, I love
Really
Chris
great.
Cornell's voice was just absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
What a voice!
yeah, he was a great talent for sure.
And so you've seen this Mudhoney T-shirt with the electro harmonic.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So I bought an Electro Harmonix Big Muff, but it was the one with the IC op amps in it, not the earlier silicon transistor one, because I thought I was going to get the Robert Fripp Babies on Fire. I don't know if you know the first Brian Eno album, Here Come the Warm Jets.
I've heard it.
Yeah, and there's a track on there called Babies on Fire where, well, I believe it's Fripp. And having watched him recently on his things with Toy Wilcox when he's doing his burning guitar, it has to be him on that track, because I read somewhere that it was Paul Rudolph from the Pink Fairies. I think he's got a different style, and he's a great player, actually, Paul Rudolph. Never lands a good album.
Is that the band with Twink, isn't it? Twink, the drummer.
Yeah,
because
he was in Tomorrow with Steve Howe.
I played with Twink.
You have?
Yeah, I know
he's still around, isn't he? Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, he moved to Morocco.
Oh, did he? So did you meet him out there?
Yeah, he got married and moved to Morocco. I don't know. I don't know if this is common knowledge, but yeah, he's you know, I played with him years and years ago.
He wasn't out there trying to find Brian Jones and Keith Richards, was he?
Oh, Brian Jones is my hero.
They were still there from 1967.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, actually a really great psychedelic era album for those of you who like 1967, 68 period stuff like I do. It's like my favorite era, really, of all music. But the first Tomorrow album didn't get released for the best part of a year, I think. But it's the one with My White Bicycle on it, and it's recorded by the same people that did Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And I just think it's a really great album. That just saying it in case anyone is curious to hear Steve Howe when he was very young playing on that, and it's got Keith West on vocals and so on. Anyway, I digress. The Big Muff pedal, yeah, I got that, and it didn't sound like Babies on Fire. It just sounded like it sounded like sort of a blizzard of nails going sideways in a horizontal plane. And when in a band context, I just found I couldn't be heard. But it turns out, you know, that and its variants were used by Smashing Pumpkins at the time to very good effect. But I think they were using it in conjunction with some Marshall, some of the sort of later model Marshall amps, and it just seemed to work with that.
Yeah.
What I was using it with didn't work. So I gave up on that, and I bought a Fuzz Face, and I like that a lot more, even though that's kind of a Blizzard of Nails box, really, the silicon one. And then I was selling that in the Henley Standard when I moved to Henley in '94, because I needed some money to pay my deposit on the house share I'd just moved into at that point. And a guy phones up and says, "Is the Fuzz Face for sale?" And it was Vlad, from who I ended up doing Lovetone with. And long story short, you know, we became friends, and he came round. I told him he couldn't have it because he asked to buy it off the guy I sold it to, and I said, "Well, no, I'm not doing that. The guy bought it; he's happy with it. Why the hell would he want to sell it back?" You know. It's just, you just don't do it, do you? I don't think so.
It's not cricket, is it?
No, it's not cricket. You know, some things you just don't do, and we won't say what some of those are, but that's one of them. Anyway, so that was early February '94, I think. Over that year, you know, we used to hang out and talk about pedals and that, and he realised that I'd been making some pedals myself. I had been experimenting, doing them at the BBC where I worked at the time. I used to work for the World Service part of the BBC, not the London branches of, you know, license payer BBC, because people used to give me a hard time. "Oh, pay my bloody license fee for people like you." No, you're not actually. It's a grant in aid from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So stick that.
You know what? Can I just say this very, very quickly? I used when I was in Argentina. I used to be, when I remember being like 14 years old, and the only link I had with England was the World Service Radio. You know, that's my own, because nobody spoke.
Oh yeah, yes.
Nobody speaks English in
imagine.
At that time, nobody speaks English in Argentina. Nobody. Everything is in Argentina, Spanish. And the only link I had to England, which you know, I'm English, and was the World Service. Yeah. So I became addicted. Every day I'll be listening, you know, for 8 hours a day to the World Service.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I mean, that they did that, I believe, from Bush House in London, which is in Aldwych near the Strand. And I did go there a couple of times because I tried to get. I worked at Caversham, where the news gathering was done during the Gulf War and so on. And I joined just after that, and I wanted to be in London because I was 22, 23 years old. I wanted to be in London, going to gigs and chasing girls and whatnot. So, but it didn't come to pass because there were no jobs. They had an internal magazine called Ariel, and it was known as No Jobs Weekly because the only jobs you could get in it in those days was at Orkney Islands transmitter engineer, or basically being a lighthouse keeper effectively. So no one wanted to do that. But yeah, so the Argentina thing, listening to World Service, yeah, I mean, you were listening to that on a shortwave radio, I guess.
Yeah, I bought a really cheap, really cheap radio, and so now that you're connected to the World Service, I'm another reason.
Oh well, but it's the BBC at the end of the day, isn't it? And let's not go there. But yeah, it certainly served its purpose though, especially in those days. And yeah,
So you
a
used
lot
to
of people
build.
around the world valued it.
So did you used to build pedals sort of in your downtime when you were there?
Yes. When there was nothing else to do, and I used to do it then. And yeah, the meatball prototype was certainly done a little bit there. And because I was working night shifts at that point, which took me years to recover from. It's awful doing used to do 12 hours on 2 days in a row, say between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And then we'd have a day or so off and then shift to the other 9 out, start again, to the other 12-hour shift. Just thinking about it's making me tongue-tied. And then what would happen is you'd go through the calendar, so you'd have a Saturday off, and then you wouldn't, then you'd have a Saturday off. It was like that: 2 days on, a day off, 2 days on, 3 or 4 days off, something like that. So it was a sort of a zigzag thing through the calendar. Drove me mad. Did it for 18 months. But in that time, I was developing the Lovetone meatball. And at home, I was living in a house share with some mates, one of whom I just got in touch with on Facebook today, having not seen him for 25 years or something, or 20 years, reminding me that me and Vlad used to sit at the dining room table talking about incomprehensible concepts. So when we were living in that house, I had the dining room area was my kind of workshop. And we had a high watt. I've got a high watt 100 watt 4-channel PA that I took 2 output valves out of, split the load impedance to make it a 50 watt amp. So it was a little bit more neighbor friendly. Not really, still bloody loud. And the 2x12 Celestian blackbacks, I think they were. And the brown sauce and the big cheese were designed through those on that dining table.
Yeah.
This is in early 1995. This would be.
So
and then we formed the company.
So you met your sort of business partner, and then kind of, did he ask you to build some pedals, or did he ask you to design some pedals? How did that come across?
Well, I think he was just encouraging me to go a bit further with my pedal design that I was already doing. And at that point, I'd met Dave Peterson, who wrote the Vox book with Dick Denny, the Vox story, sorry. Dick Denny being the designer of most of the classic Vox gear in the 50s and 60s. And he took me to meet him, and Dick heard a fuzz box that I had made that I'd actually published in a magazine in 1993, in ETI it was called. And I published this on my website years ago for people to make copies of. That's out there somewhere, I'm sure. It was called the Fuzz Tone, which is a stupid name because it wasn't a fuzz tone, it was an overdrive. But I don't know why I called it that. Perhaps I didn't have any Electroset to say anything else at the time, or something like that.
I'm going to put that.
That came out. Sorry.
I'm going to put that on my list to make.
Well, it was just a single op amp and a couple of, I think it was 3 diodes to get the clipping. And the clever thing I did in that, which was the only clever thing I did in it, was to put a resistor in place of the 4th diode. So it was diode and resistor in that direction and 2 diodes that way. So it gave you an asymmetrical clip, which gives you more second harmonic distortion. And
right.
But, that's nothing new. I mean, the Boss SD1 does something similar, 1 against 2.
Right.
It's cool. It's a cool effect. You can play with stuff like that. We used to build stuff on breadboards and just plug in capacitors, or let's put a yellow one in, see what that sounds like, a bit like that. Although I like the green one better. But obviously we were observing the value in picofarads rather than that. But it was a bit of both. I don't like that one because it's too yellow.
So if you can keep one color, it makes it sound better.
Well, yeah. So we're in this little house that I was sharing with a couple of mates, and on this round table. But they're all at work in the daytime. You see, so Vlad, he wasn't doing a day job at that time either, so he would come round we would do some work on the pedals, play the old Telecaster through the high watt with these two distortion boxes we were making, the big cheese and brown sauce, prototype them. I made a mistake on the brown sauce, which I had to build into the production models because the first one I made sounded too clean. And I thought, well, that's no good. It's not doing what it's meant to do on the tin. And then I realized I'd cocked it up when I was rushing in my haste to make it. So I put the mistake in it, said, right, we're going to make 25 of these. If any of them come back, we'll have to redesign it. And none of them came back. They're all fine. It was a little bit potentially unstable, but it was fine.
And it's the classic thing, is like the mistake is the thing that makes it unique, and people want it because of that sound. You know,
I can quote you an example of that. Well, that I remember seeing on some Beatles documentary. You know, the Rubber Soul album cover,
yeah,
where it's got the picture of the four of them looking quite sort of serious.
Yeah.
Well, they were having their serious photo phase, like on Beatles for Sale and all that, weren't they? And apparently they were all stoned at some photographer's place where he was showing them slides of the pictures, and the piece of cardboard that they were projecting onto fell backwards, and it all went ooh. So they all decided it went, oh, I like that. Let's do it like that. So they deliberately skewed the image because of the accident that had happened.
Yeah. So that's the creative thing, isn't it? You go with the accident. You go with the mistake. You know?
Exactly. And at that point in the 60s, something a bit kind of mind-bending looking like that was a big deal. Yeah. In 65, I suppose, and everyone got the message, and the rest is history.
So with these pedals, when you were designing these pedals, Dan, were you kind of harking back to an era, or were you thinking, I'm going to recreate some classics, or what was your kind of mindset? Was there a mindset to these pedals that you were making?
Yeah, I think there was, because even then I was a bit retro-minded. I mean, I was current with the alternate. I don't use the genre when I think about it, but the bands I was listening to at that time were obviously current, and I was listening to a lot of chart music at that time, just before Britpop, because basically when Kurt Cobain died, sadly, in the spring of '94, there was a bit of a void in this country that I think Oasis filled. I mean, I know they were a different kind of band, but loud electric guitars and melodies, you know, so they kind of fit right in there for that purpose. At that point, I was listening to a lot of psychedelia. Some things don't change really, because I still do now. But I was listening to fuzz sounds on those.
Yeah.
And really just phasing, flanging, fuzz, treble, boost, that kind of stuff. And I mean, the first four Lovetone pedals were designed quite quickly. The Meatball took the longest. The Big Cheese and Brown Sauce were done within a matter of weeks. And it was just really because Vlad and I were, you know, we did talk a lot about this stuff. I mean, I take credit for doing the electronics because I was the guy who understood the electronics and actually did it. It wasn't him with the soldering iron, it was me, okay? But and I did all that stuff and the hard work on all that stuff. But he had a big influence on the presentation of the stuff, how it was marketed. He did a lot of hawking for this stuff. He used to go out to London. He was a musician himself, a session guitar player. He had a hit record in '87 with Ed Stratton as Jack and Chill. They did the Jack That House Built, and a follow-up single called Beat in the Heat that I preferred of the two. But so that he brought that to it. So we bought.
That's a big part.
Brought a lot to it.
That's a big part, because it's not only, you know, actually coming up with a pedal. It's the marketing that's just as hard, isn't it?
Exactly, and yeah, credit where it's due, because there were only two of us at that point, and we shared the duties out. He had one of the first Apple Mac computers. It was old at this point. It was vintage at this point. It was a 1984 Macintosh, I think, with a little 3.5-inch floppy drive and a little tiny keyboard. And he was designing all the graphics on that with this screen about this big, you know. So it was really quite impressive. It was really quite impressive, and he had his own way of doing it that was kind of unique, and he had a lot of front as well. He wasn't frightened to speak his mind or to approach people about stuff, and he did a lot of talking on the phone to people. And I've always maintained, and I just want to reinforce the point, you know, you wouldn't be talking to me now if it wasn't for him, if it wasn't for Vlad. So I don't have a lot to do with Vlad these days, and vice versa, and I suspect he doesn't want anything to do with me anymore. and we've kind of run our course, you know. But I definitely
Like
give
any
him
great
credit
partnership,
for
it's
what
like
he.
any great partnership, you know.
Yeah, it ran its course, and it wasn't always easy, and in fact, it was bloody difficult sometimes. And I think both of us wondered where our nervous systems had gone a couple of times, you know.
But you lived it. You've
And it
lived.
all ended a long
Yeah,
time ago.
yeah.
It was a long
So I
time
mean,
ago.
and there's so many bands, Dan, and like I said, like I came across Lovetone because of Jim Palmer, but there's so many musicians that are aware of your pedals. It must be quite nice to kind of meet somebody and people are
Oh,
happy because,
sure.
you know, they're happy that you create.
Yeah. Well, no, Vlad met most of them. I was the backroom boy building the bloody things. I did get to meet a few people. It was really great. I what was really gratifying for me was some of these bands we've just been talking about ended up buying them and using them. And sometimes I'd go to Reading Festival and they were on the stage using them, making records with them. When Jay Mascis started using them and Sonic Youth, it was like, goodness, that's cool. I'm really,
Yeah,
I mean, that in itself was an end in itself for me, and it just made me feel that somehow I fit into this creative thing. I'm not up there doing it, but that's fine because I wasn't really fussed about that. I mean, I like getting up and having a strum and jumping about and turning the amp up and showing off, but I don't feel any desire, never did really have any desire to do it for a living because I think, well, I'd be dead by now if I'd done it. Let's put it that way.
or like a was it a liver transplant or something or other?
Well, it would have been a transplant of some sort, I guess, but you know, it was, I'm just not cut out for that sort of thing. I'm quite highly strung, you know, and a bit overly sensitive, really. I'm not as bad as I was. I've grown up a bit now, but I think in those days I'd have just gone nuts. So I'm glad I'm here now because I've got two children I can be here for, and you know, life's pretty good. But anyway, yeah, going back to that, a lot of people started using them. It was great, and I used to go to. What was typical for me, though, for instance, that we made this 4 pedal board that we did as a set, and they're quite collectible in and of themselves now because they had this bent 2-tier sheet of aluminium that was powder coated, and I drew up the drawing for that in an afternoon on the back of a fag packet and got it made so we could make a pedal board.
Wow.
So you know, it wasn't the best pedal board in the world conceptually, but it was a pedal board, and it had the big cheese and brown sauce at the front. At the bottom, then the connections went through the flange, the vertical flange, up to the back, over the top, and onto the meatball and the doppelganger on the top.
Wow.
And we configured it in such a way that you could usually put the big cheese into the effects loop of the meatball so that it could get filtered. All the harmonics and the big cheese could get
Yeah.
filtered by the filter in the meatball, but the trigger was getting clean drive, so the full dynamic range of drive in the trigger. Sorry, you about to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that your pedals almost had like a kind of a synthesizer sort of vibe about them. That it was kind of, it
Yeah.
wasn't a guitar pedal; it was going into something else. You know, like
Yes, exactly. Well, you see, I mean, I was always aware of the Brian Eno, Phil Manzanera thing with the guitar treatments that he was doing on, you know, the first couple of Roxy Music albums and Low by David Bowie, for example, where there's some amazing, always crashing in the same car, that guitar solo, which I think is a guy called Ricky Gardner. That the guitar solo on that track, I recommend to people to check out if they're not already huge Bowie fans. But it's going through a phase shifter, and there's some sort of filtering stuff going on. And you know, he's obviously got his hands on it and stuck it through the VCS3. You know, so what happens was after we made these 4 pedals, which I was just about to say, I went to deliver them to Brian Ferry, case in point, and he was out. And I had a Triumph Herald car at the time, and his secretary said, "Oh, he'd have loved your car." And I said, "Oh, damn! I'd love to have met him and shown him my car, you know." But it didn't happen. So there I was in Kensington, feeling a bit let down. And then I came home, but he liked the pedal board apparently.
and then
But yes, the next thing. Sorry, Brian Ferry. Yeah,
does he play guitar?
After a fashion, I think his first attempt at playing guitar, he wrote Pajama Rama. So there's a case in point that the technique doesn't necessarily facilitate a song. I mean, he came out with what is it? The chords. I guess what he was doing was the E chord, and then changing one finger, and then trying to think. That's the first 4 or 5 chords of Pajama Rama. So he was obviously playing around with the E chord.
And
That's what I read. Anyway, I don't know.
it was like we were talking about, XTC. Is it Andy Partridge?
Yes.
He wasn't a guitarist, but he was writing brilliant songs, wasn't he?
Well, he's, it's that awful saying, thinking outside the box. I mean, that could have been made for him because he's very unconventional in his thinking. But I mean, him and Dave Gregory are both excellent guitar players, both at lead and rhythm. I mean, Andy Partridge's rhythm playing stunning. I mean, there's a track on English Settlement called the first track, was it Runaways? Colin Moulding song, and he does this 5 thing, ding, really, it's like Townsend like, actually. It's executed in that kind of precise way, and just a brilliant guitar player, I think, both at soloing and rhythm, and of course Dave is as well, but they've got totally different sensibilities, and it really worked in that band when Dave joined after Barry Andrews left in '79, I think. So Drums and Wires is a classic example of the interplay between the two of them. And Black Sea, the whole thing is like the saying is a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
And then after that, the retirement from the stage and so on, there was a series of albums where the songwriting was more important than the sound in a way, but the sound was great as well, obviously. But yeah, I mean, a great example of their two styles can be heard on the Non Such album on a track called Books Are Burning, which I believe Andy wrote to the chord sequence of I Get Around, Slowed Down, which is really cool in itself. You can see that's his creativity, is able to take something like that and turn it into something completely new. But there's a trade-off solo thing at the end, a bit like what the Beatles did on the Abbey Road medley. And Andy's doing these really feral things on his guitar, and then Dave's doing a more sort of conventional rock solo, going between the two channels.
Brilliant.
So that's a really great example. And the more wacky stuff is Andy.
So I think that you've maybe, tell me if I'm wrong, you're kind of somebody that likes to think outside the box when you're designing pedals, and would that be true? And something you don't want to just standard thing. You want to be a bit more creative, and
I guess so. I mean, the thing with Vlad was that he was pushing me to. Well, what it was when we were prototyping the Meatball, I got to the point where I was having to change something and then solder a fixed value resistor in. Oh, I don't like that; it's too slow. Oh, okay, I'll get another, solder another one. Oh, to hell with this. What I did, I had this box with all these holes in it, and I just took all the parameters out onto pots on the panel, so we could alter the attack time, the decay time, all these different things on these 10 controls on the pedal. And my thinking was, well, no one's going to want to use anything like this with all these controls on, because most of them, not saying people were too thick to use it. I was just saying it's just too complicated to use in the heat of the moment on a stage.
Yeah.
But of course, where they really struck these pedals was in the studio, and people were using them as tweakable things, and it had a console shape.
Yeah.
And people like to fly an aux send out from the mixing console and fiddle with it, and then put that back on tape. You could trigger things. You could trigger things with drums and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really useful from that point of view in a studio. But so my contention was they were too complicated. But yes, I can make them complicated because it makes my life easier as a designer to tweak this and compare and contrast stuff. And then when we find something that's a good compromise, we can fix that. But he was like, no, we're not doing that. And he was quite a forceful character, and I was a bit more acquiescing. The dynamic of the relationship was that he was how can I put this? Well, more dominant than I was, because I was just too easygoing and a bit too timid at that point. He was 10 years older than me.
Right.
It wouldn't happen now. I'd send him packing now, but it didn't. And I'm glad I didn't at the time, because we wouldn't have come up with this stuff. Again, hats off to him for what he did.
How many pedals did you make to get when you're at?
I think there were 8 pedals in total. I'll tell you the chronology of them. Excuse me. Just have a sip out of my Roxy music for your pleasure.
Nice.
And thank you, Rob. My friend Rob gave me that for Christmas. The Meatball was the first one that was released in May 1995.
Mhm.
Started developing it about a year earlier, or October '94 actually started on that. The Big Cheese and the Brown Sauce came out. I can't remember which one was first out of the two of them, but they both came out in the June, July of that summer, 1995. Because I had a summer job working on Henley Regatta, mowing the grass, which is terrible because I got hay fever. But I remember Vlad coming out to me saying, "Yeah, the Brown Sauce needs finishing off." Well, I was doing that because I had no money because I was skint. Anyway, so yeah, we did the Brown Sauce Big Cheese then, and then the Doppelganger came out in September, and that was the first four. And the pedal board followed in the spring of '96. So those four pedals, they were in a flight case with a power supply and a wiring loom. So it was a bona fide self-contained pedal board. Henry Ford, any color you like, but it has to be this. So that was our contribution to pedal board development, I suppose. And then, I used that like it was a synth.
No DuPont colors.
No DuPont colors. No. I'm not at liberty to tell you what those colors are actually, but they are distinctive, and there's a rhyme and reason behind all of them. But we were influenced by Henri Matisse paintings and colors of curries that we went out for and things like that. So it was all a bit kind of, a bit arty, but why not? These things need to be arty, I think. But yeah, the sound treatment thing with those four pedals was something we used to do. We used to do gigs where Vlad would play a Stratocaster into that and into an amp, usually an AC30 or a high watt, because that's what I had and what I liked. And we did some gigs with Sonic Boom from Spaceman 3's band EAR, which was Experimental Audio Research. And we did gigs in Vienna, Copenhagen, a few in London.
Wow.
And then Vlad didn't want to do it anymore. I did one on my own with Sonic. And it was that Sonic was on a Synthia AKS synthesizer, or was it a Synthia? Not with a keyboard sequencer, just the suitcase version of a VCS3 EMS synthesizer. He was over that end of the stage with his, and I was over this end with the VCS3. And we were doing sort of question and answer noises like that with loads of echo on. And people in the audience going, "Oh, wow." Girl came up to me after one gig and said, "Oh, I thought what you were doing on that synthesizer tonight was really beautiful." Thank you very much. But it was, and the funny thing was, Sonic would draw a graph on a piece of paper. Let me find a Mickey Baker jazz chord book, folks. Every home should have one.
Robin Ford.
There it is.
Robin
Ford says so. You know,
Robin Ford, haven't you? It's his copy.
I did get that.
It's his copy.
It's not his copy.
Oh, right.
But you can still buy it, and it's only like a $5. But that page 2, which I haven't got beyond yet after a year.
But you know what? Robin Ford, he said many times, somebody said, "Did you read the whole book?" And he said, "No, I think he only got like to page 5 or something."
Well, great minds think alike. There's hope for me yet. But he's a great guitar player. I love what he does, and he's a cool dude, isn't he? But yeah, so this book, well, I'm using this as an example. Okay, so what would happen was Sonic would get it would be an axis of activity, amplitude, and time. The time being the 45-minute set or 1 hour set. And he would draw a sort of squiggly mountain range on it. And he'd say, well, we'll go up a bit here, then we'll bring it down for a bit here. And then we'll bring it up here to a sort of climax. And then we'll bring it down gently at the end. And every gig we did, he seemed to draw the same graph. But it was great fun, and I haven't spoken to Pete for a long time. But if you're watching this, Pete, hello, and thank you very much for the opportunity to do that, because that was really good fun, and I learned a lot from it.
And you use your pedals on that.
Yeah, we did. And I remember controlling them with a torch and a photocell and stuff, which is what gave us the idea for the light jacks, which were plugged into the ring stinger, and most of the pedals had a facility where you could put a pedal into them, and I found that if you plug the 1/4-inch jack in, if not all the way, then halfway, you could put a photocell inside a 1/4-inch mono jack plug with a hole at the end for the light to come in, and you could sort of get theremin type effects and things on some of them.
Incredible.
Just change parameters, so the stage lighting would randomize the oscillator rates and things like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's all right if you're not a control freak. If you want consistency and things being, then it's the complete opposite of what you want. But I'm not that kind of person, I like to embrace the randomness of these things, really.
Yeah,
But anyway, yeah. So we had that 4 pedal setup, and that was kind of the synth treatment approach in and of itself. And then because we're doing these gigs with Sonic, what it was, we went to see Stereo Lab, and Sonic was guesting with them, and this was spring of '96 at the Alley Cat venue in Gun Street in Reading, since closed. And I met him there, and I said, "Oh yeah, I used to listen to Spaceman 3, I love all that," and got chatting, and he showed us his VCS3 synth, and I thought, oh, I've always wanted to see one of these because of Pink Floyd and Dark Side of the Moon and Metal and whatever, and then obviously Brian Eno using it on the Bowie stuff and in Roxy. So he showed us all these oscillators, and you could change the shape of the waveforms. You could make the filter self oscillate and use it as a voice on itself, and white noise into that. The joystick control, the fact that you could turn a control with it and then drive everything crazy from that one control is extremely powerful. And that's the opposite approach to what's used on, say, an ARP Odyssey, where it's you're adjusting all your inputs on that rather than one output driving everything crazy. But it was conceived as a non-keyboard synth. When they put a keyboard on the VCS3, it was done as an afterthought.
Right.
And the other interesting thing about that is it was designed by a guy called David Cockrell, who went to work for EH around about late 1974, I think. And then he designed the Small Stone, the Electric Mistress, the micro synthesizer. So, sorry, my speaker's gone off again. Come on, bloody digital stuff. If that was a valve thing, it would just stay on.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my whole point. But yeah, he was a real genius, that guy, and he's still around, I believe. And there are a couple of interviews with David Cockrell on YouTube. So if you're interested, folks, look him up, because he deserves some credit. Those EH pedals didn't come from nowhere, and they're not necessarily designed by who you think designed them, and it was him. And later on, a guy called Howard Davis did a lot of the EH designs as well.
Who owned EH, Electro Harmonics? Who owned?
Mike Matthews was the chief honcho at EH. And also David Cockrell designed, I think the last thing he did for him was the 16-second digital delay, which I remember reading about in Sound on Sound or 1-2 Testing, one of those magazines in the early 80s. And then, because the technology was still coming up for that to be possible, he then went on after that. He left EH and went to work for Akai and designed all those S3000 samplers for them. So his contribution to music is pretty huge, really. Because think how many records you've heard those EH pedals on.
Yeah.
I think prior to him coming along, they had the Big Muff and the Ego Booster, the LPB1, and that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole of them, like New Wave, was done on those pedals.
Exactly. When the Electric Mistress came out, post-punk happened.
Yeah.
It was. It came out. Well, it came out in late '76, didn't it? But it found its way onto Pink Floyd. Animals probably was the first Floyd album it appeared on, and then David Gilmour's guitar sound his guitar sound featured that quite heavily on The Wall, and his first solo album. You can hear the Electric Mistress all over that.
And of course, the best guitar player in the world, Andy Summers.
Yeah, well, Andy Summers made a very important contribution to popular music and popular guitar playing, because he was introducing, and not necessarily in anything but a jazz sense on this track. Sorry about this, folks. I don't fancy myself as a guitar player, but I'll just use this to demonstrate. But a hole in my life is, the jazz voicings of a minor 7 and a minor 6. So we might play a minor 7 like that, but a minor 6 where you got to get to that one. But he just did.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, that's Sting wrote it, of course. But, and then just slide it up, and then later on so it appears there. But yeah, all that stuff he was doing with ninths. And then, how he did this with such tiny hands, because he's got tiny hands. Hang on.
Yeah, that's how he did it. Because he's a classical.
Find a plectrum, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, he studied classical guitar.
Yes, he did play classical.
Yeah.
But that's really, and then he was doing the Lenny Bro stuff. Oh God, I won't try that. Those, pinched harmonics and things.
Really nice, yeah.
But yeah, and his use of effects. I mean, that first Police album's stunning, and it's recorded on a 16 track with, I think they used an RE201 Space Echo for the outboard on it, and some of the Scamp Rack audio and design stuff. Nigel Gray, brilliant producer. He did Juju by Susie and the Banshees at that studio in Surrey as well. And those first 3 Police albums.
So to digress back to your story. So you've been with Lovetone. You created Lovetone with this guy, and then there was you finished. You finished that business, and then you moved.
It was a very slow death, I'm afraid. It was a very slow death. The turning point for me was in 2000, having had a few. In fact, I had reservations as early as 1996 when I moved to Chingford. Around that time to do, I just thought, do I really want to do this? Because even if I'd stopped at that point, we'd have made our impact, But I soldiered on with it and did the ring stinger, the wobulator, the ring stinger, and the flange with no name, as it's now called, the question mark flanger.
Right.
They were done in the light of having investigated analog synthesis, and consequently much more complicated, lots of bells and whistles. Not always necessary, but we had some cool ideas in them, I think. We did those to follow on from it, and it was they were all designed. I think I designed the flanger at the beginning of 2000, and I remember, rebuilding the first 100 of them in the summer of 2000 with really terrible hay fever because it was too noisy, and I had to replace 10 components on each one.
Right.
So I was working at that point. I was working from my dad's bungalow in his spare bedroom, and I said, "Dad, just so you know," I said, "there are 100 of these pedals in the cupboards here, and they're worth quite a lot of money. I'm not saying that you're not going to do anything with them, but just bear it in mind. Keep the house locked." But yeah, they were costing £350 each at that time. If we multiplied out now what they're going for, it's kind of scary thought, really. But to have 100 of them in the cupboard.
So you kind of there must have been a point where you kind of finished, and because to move forward, I know that I don't want to rush your story forward, but
it's all right. I'm going on a bit.
I first became aware of you on 2 reasons. Number one, these amazing pedals that Jim Palmer had, and then secondly, you invented the best compressor I've ever played ever.
Well, thank you. Yeah, a lot of people like that, didn't they?
Yeah, and that was called a Dinosaur. So
Dinosaur. Yeah, I'll fast forward a little bit now. So, yeah, we did those Lovetone pedals. We did 8. Okay, meatball, big cheese, brown sauce, which were the 2 small ones. Doppelganger, wobulator, ring stinger, and flange with no name. Okay, and then we decided to bring the 2 small pedals into the larger format box because it was easier for us to manufacture it that way, and we like the idea of the 2-in-1 approach, which kind of worked. It didn't sound exactly the same as the small ones for whatever reason. I could never find out why. But anyway, that's that now. Long since deleted. And so they were the 8 pedals, if you like. One of them being a replicant of the 2 small ones. Dinosaur I set up in 2002 because I wanted to do my own thing. I felt a bit kind of bit hemmed in by the whole thing. Around about 2000, I decided I wanted out because we were putting a recording studio together that never really happened. And then when Vlad said he wanted it to do his own music and not wanting to record anyone else or have any other musicians involved, I thought, well, that's it then. I'm not interested. That's not what I'm doing this for. I want to meet people and work with different people. Well, I did then. I don't think I do now. But yeah, anyway. So Dinosaur will happen in 2002. I formed it so I could do all the repairing of Lovetone pedals under my own steam and earn a bit of pocket money from that, because that's how desperate things were. And I designed my own pedal called a tube bender. Well, I originally did this with David Peterson, who I mentioned earlier on. We designed it for Guitar and Bass magazine, I think it was called at that time. We did it as a kit. Now, I changed the circuit around a bit for the ones I did myself. We just had this agreement where I gave him some profits from it for a while, and it's all fine and dandy to this day. But yeah, I made that. I didn't make that many of them. We're talking hundreds of each pedal that were ever made. Any of these we're talking about now. And I made that for a while, stopped doing it for a while, stopped doing all the Lovetone servicing for a while because I was married, had children, and started, things started going wrong and I got divorced and so on. So I was kind of not in a fit state to, sorry, I'm just turning my sound on again. Right. At that point, I did 2013, I think it was, I bought out the overdriven preamp, which was a reworking of that tube bender pedal without a tone control. And some people really like that one. I think the fact it didn't have a tone control was to its detriment now. So I think Einstein said that everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. And he was right, because I did that pedal and understood what he meant. Because amps are different, aren't they? They've got mid-range curves that are different, and sometimes you need to push the mids or pull the mids. If it's the same mids on the pedal, it's either going to work with your amp or it isn't. And the chances are, if you've got 3 amps, it might only sound good with one of them. So it's a failure as a pedal in that sense. There's that. And then the Opti compressor came out. I'd been wanting to make a compressor for years. Lovetone never did one. We didn't do a chorus pedal either. And we didn't do a delay, which is what everyone wanted us to do. We never did it because, well.
So what was your idea with what made you? What was the idea for the compressor? Were you trying to recreate some analog sort of gear that you?
Yeah. I mean, I've always liked the sound of optical compressors. I mean, I love things like 1176s with a field effect transistor in, and variable mu compressors with valves like Altec 436 or Fairchild. I mean, Fairchild for a while actually. I used to listen to CDs through it because I just had to use it and watch that lovely VU meter light up and go zoom, zoom, zoom to the music I was pumping through it. So I'd had a bit of experience. I had built some compressors for Lovetone that we never made, which were just rack units, stereo rack units. But this one was a completely original design. Having said that, the seeds for it were in a magazine I had at school, Practical Electronics. I was going to build one as a project at school, and then I never did. And I kept thinking, I must try something with that one day. So I did. And then I thought, well, this is okay, but it's too crude. So I did this thing where I had the 2 photocells in parallel, and one was being driven off peaks this way, and one was being driven off peaks the other way. And their release time was averaging out. And then I realized that's the same principle that's used in the Teletronics LA2A. Mm-hmm. So that was my Opticomp. And I had the thing with the axe match thing on it, which we dropped that for the Thorpy reissue of it, which is the Fat General. It's the same pedal, effectively. The axe match switch was to go between single coils, P90s and humbuckers, which if you look at them on a PPM meter or a VU meter, they're 3 dBs apart, all 3 of those. So if you, like many guitar players have, a range of guitars with different output pickups, and the 3 common ones are those, you can just throw the switch and your guitar will give you the same drive. And the compressor was used as a buffer intended for the start of the chain. And then the whole lot would be driven off that low noise, because if you want a really quick and dirty solution to pedal board problems, is to put a really decent buffer on your guitar as soon as possible. Some people don't like that. The purists don't like that. Well, if you want to be practical and not have untold problems with pedals, if you're using more than a few, it's a good idea to use a decent cable from your guitar, make it the best you've got. Doesn't have to be an evidence cable or whatever, but if you want to go that far, then that's the one place to have it. Right. And then and we're talking passive pickups, of course, when I'm talking about this. And then you go into the compressor or the buffer, and then you can go through all your other pedals, and it doesn't matter what the cable quality is like as much then, and it doesn't matter which ones you switch on or off, whether they're true bypass or not, because every time you switch it off, you're going back to a low drive impedance, and it means that whatever you've got happening after that, it negates all the losses in the rest of your pedals.
Because
go on.
I guess the whole thing about the pickups and the cable is a almost, what is it, capacitor or resistor in itself, all these things add up, don't they? And I guess you have to take this into account,
You do, and the guitar cable is essentially a capacitor, and once it gets to a certain length, that capacitor starts to eat into your treble. It's inductive and it's resistive, but it's really the capacitance that's the major loss component. And um, I mean, some people embrace that. Bill Nelson of Bebop Deluxe in the 70s, I believe Pete Cornish made a pedal board for him that had a 10,000-foot cable simulator, which was probably a resistor and a capacitor, but when you step on it, it probably just made which might have sounded great for a particular effect he wanted, and then switch it off and everything's sparkly and clean again.
Incredible. So, how many pedals did you design for Dinosaur, or how you released?
I think I made 3 or 4. Well, there was the Tube Bender, 2003, 2012, late 2012, early 2013. There was the OPA 101 overdriven preamp, the OTC 201 optical compressor, or optical tandem compressor, that stands for, because of the 2 parallel photocells with their averaging effect. Because what happens with a photocell is the light shines on it, the attack time speeds up, and then and you get a thing called history effect. So it makes it quite quite a complicated response. Okay. Anyway, so that's that one. I didn't do anything for a while. Then I bought out a very, very limited range of treble boosters, which I built, on Variboard, because I wasn't making very many of them. But they sounded good, and sold a few of them. Then I had 2 switches on to get 2 different treble boosts, a fixed one and a variable one. And they're a bit like the classic Rangemaster or the Brian May type treble boost that you can drive a front end of a valve amp with to great effect.
Sorry. Can I come back? Did you say Variboard? Yeah. Did you say you built some on Variboard?
Yeah, I used Variboard, but I don't like Variboard. I hate Variboard with a vengeance. But it was the circumstances at the time where I needed some money, and I didn't have the means to get PCBs done at that point.
And
I can't even remember the exact reason. This has been lazy.
One of the best pedals I've ever played is it was the original version of the Red Snapper. It was called a Red Snapper.
I've heard of a Red Snapper before, but that might be something to do with a Led Zeppelin biography. But sorry,
but a company called Menatone, and they had this.
Yes,
original Red Snapper pedal, and it was made on a. I looked inside, and it was just a Variboard, but it sounded incredible. It's like obviously a Tube Screamer variant,
Oh, okay. You could build that.
Yeah, so from that kind of era, I just thought, Variboard is actually, maybe it sounds better than PCB. I know this is stupid. It doesn't.
No, it doesn't. It might sound slightly different because it's got a different dielectric constant, because Variboard is made out of SRBP, which stands for synthetic resin bonded paper. Right. That's the cheap crap version, and then you can get fiberglass versions of it. Or stripboard is Variboard is a brand name. Stripboard is what it's called. It's a prototyping board. It's convenient, but it's also a pain in the ass, and I hate it because how many times have I built stuff on Variboard and just gone, just throwed it across the room because the solder all joins up. Very bored, it's called. Anyway, it's all right for what it's useful for, but yes, you can make stuff commercially with it if you want to. I don't think it's a very time-consuming way of doing it, and not economical. I wouldn't have thought. A printed circuit board like that is much more cost-effective these days. But you can do stuff on sideboard if you want. I mean, early pedals were done like that. Yeah, tone benders were, weren't they? And the Marshall Superfuzz was on 0.15 inch variable. Yeah.
Wow. And so just sorry to fast forward you, but now you're working with this great company called ThorpyFX, and Adrian, who actually I know a little bit as an acquaintance, but he's amazing. He's got an amazing company, amazing pedals, and now you've been working for how many years? Have you been working for ThorpyFX?
Well, I mean, full time for almost a year now. But we've known each other since 2013, because Adrian bought my first 2. Not my first 2. He bought he bought the first 3 Dinosaur pedals. And I met up with him when I delivered the second one. I said, just up the road from me. He was in Swindon at the time, and I live in Wantage. So we met up one summer day with his wife Georgia, and I don't know if Oppie the dog was there then. I think he was. And then we had a Sunday lunch, and I gave him his pedal, and we got chatting. And he mentioned, or they mentioned, because they're husband and wife, I think they were about to be married then, and that they wanted to set up a pedal business. I thought, well, cool, yeah, I'll give you some advice, And I have given a few pedal companies advice, and thank goodness that they've all been successful, because I'd feel bad if they weren't, and I've given them my advice. But I don't think that much of it was based on my advice. I met David Ranger, Simon Keats from Origin, a chap called Luke Hilton from Stone Deaf Effects. Didn't actually meet him. I had some phone calls with him about 15 years ago. And then I was just saying to them, this is how I did it roughly, but don't do it like that, because you'll go crazy, and there's better ways of doing it. But these sort of things, a bit like what I said to you, just for very basic advice, and yeah, it seems to have worked for them all. But yeah, it's really great to be working for Adrian and Georgia, and we've they bought out a lot of pedals under their own steam, and they're the ones who are making them and running the business. I'm just this old geezer that designs circuits for them sometimes, and I fix ones when they don't work and things like that. But it's a good setup, and I like it, and it's really, really good. And we're really good friends as well. So the whole thing it feels a lot easier than the previous relationships I had in pedal companies.
And what's what I guess what's nice about that is that because you're a pedal designer, that's what you do. You design. You're a designer. You write, you draw the schematics, whatever. And I guess Adrian's been really sort of clever in a way, and spotted to bring somebody of your experience. And I think because he's got a great company, it's got a great legacy.
Yes.
So the two of you, it's really, it's going to make it bigger and better, and
yeah, it's a good meeting of minds, I think. And yeah, over the years I used to think, well, hopefully one day someone will call me up and give me some work. It never happened. Didn't get not a sausage. And I used to sort of make it quite clear that I was the guy that designed the Lovetone pedals over the years, because I didn't want it to be misconstrued and it wasn't me, because in the early days that it could have come to pass that Muggins here didn't do anything, and I wanted to put that right.
Yeah.
Because I think Vlad gave the impression to people that it was all him, and I wasn't happy about that, and I don't think anyone would be, would they? But it's not unheard of for that to happen. I didn't want him to take all the credit for it. Let's put it that way. I'm quite happy to concede that he did half of the thing, and I did half of it. A bit like after getting divorced, you can blame it all on the ex-partner, or you can take responsibility and say, well, at least half of it probably was me.
You know what? It's like the song you played, "Every Breath You Take."
So that's a pretty creepy song.
Well, yeah, that's another. We can talk about that on another level. But my question is this: what was Andy Summers' role? Did Sting come up with the major 9 shapes, or did Andy Summers?
Well, Andy Summers' chord vocabulary is second to none. I mean, I learned so much from watching his. He did a video in the late '90s talking about all of these. Sorry, folks. Here we go again. Dan gets his bloody guitar out. Can't even be bothered to plug it in. That tells you everything, doesn't it? But you got a minor chord like that, or you can put the 9th in and get that, and then you got the dissonance between these two notes. And I believe Andy Summers wrote this one, which will sound wrong because it will be on the offbeat, but it's Spirits in the Material World. That uses a
wicked
9 and 9th.
But my question is, because Sting actually, because this surprised me, because I just assumed, Andy Summers wrote the guitar part, but I'm wondering, did Sting?
I think he did, because I don't know if you've ever heard the album he did with Robert Fripp, I Advanced Masked. They were listening to
the first one they did. Was that the first collaboration?
I think.
So the first collaboration.
1981.
Yeah, that's the first one.
1982, I think it was. There's a couple of tracks on there. I forget what they're called, but you can hear this sort of eighth note staccato thing,
Right.
where one of them's playing slowly and one of them's playing this staccato eighth note thing, and it's like the Bartok violin duets. I think that's where they got the idea. And of course, the whole the 80s King Crimson polyrhythmic thing is obviously playing a part in there as well, because Robert Fripp does that type stuff as well as his burning guitar and his his oeuvre of guitar, which I love. He's one of my favorites personally, but yeah, because he's just so different, he just does his thing.
And he's with Toyah, isn't he?
Sorry, with Toyah.
He's Robert Fripp with Toyah.
Yeah, they've been married for like 35 years, I believe. But just recently, they've been doing these lockdown things on YouTube, which are quite entertaining.
Hilarious.
They got this guy called Sidney Jakin who plays in new standard tuning like Robert does, but he's got a mask on. but yeah, he's been taught by Robert Fripp, which is quite a privilege, I should think.
Yeah.
But anyway, this thing, Andy Summers, I think he brought that to it. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there, but
that was the thing with them, was they were always fighting to get their music on the album, and they felt that Sting was taking over, and that's what all the arguments were about,
Really? I don't know. I think the main the main dynamic, as I understand it, because I've just watched it's a really great film that Stuart Copeland put together of all his old Super 8 cine footage that he took in sort of 78 to 81 or whatever it was, or even later, that whole period anyway, the police were together. You often saw him with a Super 8 camera, like in da-do-do-do-da-da-da. He's filming them, and he's not doing his drumming, he's just holding the camera. But he put together this film, and there's some fascinating footage in there. But I believe what it was, that Sting and Stuart were the fire and ice, if you like, and poor old Andy's the lukewarm water in the middle. But no, that sounds wrong. But I think he's really important in the scheme of things, and all three of them were very, very talented. And when they got back together, they still had that magic, I think.
Yeah,
that was 2007.
Yeah,
I never did get to see them, which I'm cheesed off about now.
I
wanted to see them in '79, but I was too young.
But you know what? My one thing, because we're gonna do a few more Zoom things on where we discuss bands in the future. But one food for thought: when you listen to Stuart Copeland's drumming before the reunion, and it had an edge, I felt afterwards, he can still obviously drum, but I don't know if it was a recording or what, but I didn't feel that raw magic that I heard on the before they. I know this might be blasphemy, but
well, I mean, I don't think the passing of years is kind to a drummer, because it's so physical. I mean, I didn't notice that when I was listening to it, but I wasn't necessarily listening to it in that regard.
He's playing when he was young. He was
amazing, an amazing drummer, and I think he learnt a lot of that stuff when he was living out in Saudi Arabia when he was a child, and he certainly takes a completely different view on it to most drummers, doesn't he? And I believe Neil Peart was a huge fan, which is quite an accolade, isn't it? But I think most drummers doff their hats to Stuart Copeland. Yeah. And that first Police album, my friend Martin and I were listening to that recently. We used to listen to it when we were students, and we've always had a special place in our heart for that one. But I like all 5 of the Police albums. I think they're all really, really good.
You're going to love this. I was in a place called Gozo. I used to go there once or twice.
Oh, near Malta? Yeah.
Gozo. Yeah, Malta. And the guy that designed all the album covers lives there.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you designed all these album covers?
Yeah, I've got a photo with me and him on my Facebook. I'll try and tag you in. I'll tag you into it, because I can't remember his name, but he actually designed all, there's the digital one and the other one. He designed it.
Yeah. They were great covers.
He worked for A&M.
Yeah. The back cover of Regatta de Blanc, where they've got their 3 blonde hairdos looking downwards, and that nice handwriting. I thought that was really cool.
He did all that.
But Christmas '79, my mum bought me Regatta de Blanc on cassette. I was 11 that year. And my brother bought me Outlanders d'Amour on vinyl, so that was a good Christmas, because I had both of those albums, and it blew my mind. So good.
Another thing, you probably know this, but A&M, the A is Herb Albert.
That's right. I don't know who the M is. I ought to know. But yeah, it's Herb Alpert's record label, wasn't it? I remember that. The Carpenters were on it, and who else? Supertramp,
Yeah.
Sex Pistols, Goodbye A&M, whatever he says at the end of EMI.
So
Another fine band.
so we're gonna wrap this up, Dan. But so
Yeah.
now, just so folks know what's happening, the future. What is the future?
My name's not Doris Stokes. I'm sorry, I can't help you there. And I don't have crystal balls. So, well, the future hopefully will be good, because of the way things are going in the world at the moment, who knows what's happening. But yeah, I mean, my plan is to carry on working with ThorpyFX, and got some more designs in the can. I can't say too much about it because it's not for me to say, but that's the arrangement we've got, and I kind of pressed for it to be that kind of arrangement, just so I don't have to answer any questions, because it suits me not to, frankly. But yeah, we have had we've talked about a lot of stuff. We've got a lot of designs. I've designed a lot of circuits for them since last year. It's just a matter of putting them out there, and the time lag that's inevitable for that, because they're still quite a small company, but they're very powerful with what they've got. So we'll be seeing more pretty soon, hopefully. And I like the idea of carrying on doing that with Thorpy. I've got my own company, Coggins Audio Limited, that's kind of low profile at the moment, early days and all that. But I'd like to do studio rack gear through that. Because I know I can design it and make it. And I went to Conk Studios a couple of years ago, and the engineer there said to me, you could make these into racks, or make rack gear stuff. And I thought, well, I like the idea of that.
You know this?
Now, what's that?
This
Broadhurst Garden.
yeah. This is a Decca. It's
of course, Broadhurst Gardens, where Kluke's Cleek and Decca Studios were. So is that a mic pre then?
yeah, it's the mic pre by DAV Electronics, and
Is that based on the Decca console then?
yeah, it's based on the Decca.
Is it Valve? Is
I
it
use
Valve?
I use this all the time. For this channel, whenever I record, I go through this. I love it.
Is it Valve or solid state?
No, solid state.
Interesting. So they were using solid state. So the famous Beano album, for example, and all those John Mayall albums in the
I think that
late
was
60s. Were they done on a solid state console then?
No, I think that good question, but I don't know. The truth is, I don't know.
Moody Blues recorded there, didn't they?
Yeah.
I guess. Anything on Daram record?
I did a documentary on this channel, but I can't remember. I can't exactly remember what it was, but I didn't get. I don't think I went into that depth of the circuitry. But you know what? It would have been new. It would have been some of the, because they were design. They had engineers with overalls who were designing stuff all the time and making.
Yeah, well, EMI did, didn't they? That solid state console, the TG12345, that was the Beatles commissioned before it was ready during the making of the White Album. I think Dear Prudence was the first 8-track recording they did with that desk. But I'm a bit of a Beatles nerd. I might be completely wrong on that, of course, but I believe that that desk was used all through EMI through the 70s. All the Kate Bush stuff, all the Pink Floyd stuff was done on the transistor console, and Mike Hedges was using them on Manic Street Preachers and stuff like that. I met him years ago at Abbey Road, and he kindly showed us that, and it sounded lovely. The mid-range frequencies are just. Wow. Terry Britton had one as well. It had the Rolling Stones names etched onto the thing, because they used it for the Some Girls album. But I like the sound of solid state consoles, although I think the Abbey Road stuff all the stuff done in Studio 3, like Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Revolver, were done on the Telefunken desk, I believe, which is the one that EMI copied for the REDD consoles, which are V72 Telefunken amps and passive equalizers, I think. But that's all I know. I just know that I love the sound of those records. And I suspect that Tomorrow album was done in number 3 as well, because it sounds exactly like it. Bebop Deluxe stuff was done in there later, interestingly. But that would have been on the solid state console, I think. John Leckie did those. Anyway, the one last thing I just want to say, I found out about sound techniques, early Trident Studio stuff like the Bowie Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust albums were not done on a Trident 8-range console, but a Sound Techniques 8-range console. And there's a company in the States who've just revamped Sound Techniques, and they're bringing out studio channels based on that. But these were British-made consoles being made at the Sound Techniques studio in Chelsea, and they were shipping them out to the States. And I believe Strange Days by the Doors was done on it, and the Love Forever Changes album, and the Stooges Funhouse at Elektra was done on it. So, and what I love about all those albums is they sound so clear, and you know, it turns out that it might have something to do with that console. I'm sure it had a lot to do with the engineers who were working out on it, and also the mics they were using and the sound of the rooms. But sorry, my sound's gone off again. But yeah, I just found it fascinating when I was watching this documentary recently. It was on YouTube about sound techniques, and this solid state, very early solid state, simple console they made just makes these recordings sound so timeless. Nick Drake, Fairport Convention, all that stuff was done on it as well.
So was that the studio? What Trident Studios in London?
Well, Trident Studios was in Soho in St Anne's Court, and this Sound Techniques place was in Chelsea. I forget the name of the road. Pink Floyd recorded Arnold Lane and See Emily Play, and not Jug Band Blues. That was done at Delane Lee, but that had a Sound Techniques desk as well, apparently.
Great. So
Deep Purple in rock, and there's the I think Fleetwood Mac then Play On might have been done through one. I'm not sure, but that sounds nice. I mean, it's that clear, clean sound. You know, the music was rocking, but the presentation of it was detailed, and the reverb tails are really good. And yeah,
you know what, we're gonna wrap things up now, Dan. But we're gonna do some more hangs where we maybe discuss some prog, some British music, some studio sort of technology, whatever. We're gonna figure out a way to carry this on, because it's kind of like you're a fountain of knowledge, man.
Well, either that or I'm a bore. Perhaps it's just that. But you know, I'm good at pop quizzes. The thing is, I've just got one of those minds. I'm very good with dates, and I'm probably on the spectrum a bit. Well, in fact, I know I am a little bit, but thankfully not too bad.
I think
enough to be useful, you know.
I think to be an effects pedal designer, you need to be.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I know those names for those pedals are pretty crazy. I thought of all the pedal names for Lovetone except Ring Stinger, which was Ashley Slater from Freak Power's idea, and I always give him a shout out for that, because credit where it's due, you know. And Vlad thought of the name Lovetone, which I've never really liked. And it's not because Vlad thought of it. It's just I didn't really like the name, but we had to have a name when we incorporated the company. You know?
But it's easy to remember. It does.
Oh yeah, it's perfect. Everyone else seems to like it. It's just you know, it's like you don't necessarily eat your own dog food, do you? It's like it's too close to home. Lovetone. You know, it is what it is, and it works. You know, I'm sure. Well, you know, some band names probably sounded stupid at first, and people got used to them.
It's just how people first discover you. For me, I first discovered you via Dinosaur. So I always think of that was my first, you know, and then
that was a portmanteau. That was a portmanteau of two words. That was dinosaur and oral. You know, old-fashioned sound. You know. Wow. I'm not saying I'm an unashamed Luddite. I mean, I'm trying not to be anymore, really. But it was just a kind of, you know, retro is good thing, which I don't necessarily agree with now, but it can be. Let's put it that way. It can be. It's not always the case. There's some stuff made years ago that was cack, and we all know that, if we can be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, like was it the Lino floor?
Lino floors, yeah. You don't see many of them anymore, do you? Yeah, that takes me back a bit, but I never had one. Oh no, we did actually. Yeah, horrible. Not good things to have in a toilet anyway.
Okay, Dan, it's been
on that note.
Yes, on that note, on that bombshell. Oh, it's been amazing, Dan, to hang with you, and we're gonna come back real soon, and we're gonna do a show again real soon on something like maybe, Bebop Deluxe, or the best
Yeah,
bands
I'm not
that
an
ever made it.
expert, but I'd like to raise a bit of awareness to that band. Yes, for sure. And a Pato with Ollie Halsall as well, or
No,
Halsall, I can't remember how you pronounce
yeah,
it. Yeah, because again, it's the same. It's like the Radio 2 playlist problem. The Kinks. You only ever hear, what is it? Waterloo, Sunset, and Lola. Actually, do you hear Waterloo Sunset? I don't think it gets played now. It's always the same 2 or 3 songs they play. They forget that there's so many other brilliant songs that they did. I mean, every single they released was a
but
gem.
let's do a Kinks. Maybe we should do a Kinks thing where we can pull up some audio. I don't know if we get done, because sometimes YouTube doesn't like it, but we'll try and play some
No,
music.
I think we could be in hot water there. But I mean, we can talk about it. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a massive fan. They
we'll
were one of
figure
the
it out.
first bands I heard.
Yeah, we'll figure out a
And
way to.
Dave Davis's guitar playing and his sound, and just the sound of the Shel Talmy production on those old Pie singles. That was a big one for me. We had the Sunny Afternoon album when I was a kid, and I used to listen to it over and over again. And it's a really good compilation of A and B sides, and very, very important to me in my development for what made me think a good guitar sound was.
Yeah.
Dave Davis's guitar sounds are right up there for that.
I'm going to do
So
a
if you're
history.
watching, Dave, which I doubt somehow, but if you're watching, cheers.
I'm going to do a history on Dave Davis's guitars very soon. When I get back to doing them, he's going to be my first one I'm going to do.
That would be great because, yeah, he played some cool ones, didn't he? He had that guild that he got from George Harrison that's on the Kink Controversy cover that got nicked, I
Yeah.
believe, and
Nice.
the Flying V, or the Futurist, as I believe he called it.
Did he play it like that, sort of with the V?
Yeah, he did. He played through the V. He got fantastic about it. But don't they always sound great? They don't just look good; they really sound good as well. Flying V's. Yeah, and he was into Les Pauls and he played all sorts of guitars, didn't he? But he always tellies. Just great. I just love it.
Okay then,
Yeah.
guys, that's it. We're gonna say goodbye now. It's been a real pleasure, Dan. Thanks a million.
Likewise, Roman. Yeah, really enjoyed it. And
Take care.
thanks, guys. If you've got this far, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Okay. Cheers.